For 11 years, Nathan walked into the same coffee shop every morning. Same time, same drink, black coffee, no room. And for 9 of those years, the barista never once learned his name. He'd stand there in a windbreaker with a frayed cuff while the kid at the register looked right through him to the next person in line. Then Nathan sold the small business he'd been building in his garage. Same windbreaker, same coffee, same frayed cuff. And within a month, the barista was writing Nathan on the cup before he asked. The owner came out to shake his hand. Somebody held the door. Nothing about Nathan changed. Not his order, not his face. The only thing that changed was a number nobody in that shop could even see. And here's the uncomfortable part. You already know which version of a person gets their name on the cup. We all know. We just don't say it out loud. This isn't a video about money. It's about what money does to the people standing around you. My name is Nick, and I've spent an embarrassing amount of my life studying the gap between what people say money does and what it actually does. And the thing nobody tells you is that wealth doesn't just change your bank balance. It changes the behavior of every single person who finds out about it. The way they greet you, the way they price you, the way they decide in about 4 seconds whether you're a problem to be managed or a person to be kept happy. So today we're going to climb the entire ladder together, $0 to 25 million. And at every rung, I'm going to show you exactly how the people around you start treating you differently, why they do it, and what it quietly costs you in the other direction. Because here's the part that'll stick with you. Some of the worst treatment happens at the bottom, and some of the loneliest treatment happens at the very top. I'm not a financial advisor, and this isn't financial advice. This is just what I've watched happen to people, including a few versions of myself, on the way up and the way down. Let me start with the number that breaks everyone's brain. In 2022, the Federal Reserve ran its big survey of how much American families are actually worth, and the average family net worth came out to about $1,280,000, $1 million. Sounds like we're all secretly loaded, right? Except that's the average, and the average is a liar because the median family, the one standing exactly in the middle with half of America richer and half poor, that family was worth about $235,000, not $1 million, $192,000. So the average is more than 5 times higher than the typical person. And the reason for that gap is the whole video. A small number of people at the top are so wealthy that they drag the average into the sky, while the actual middle of the country is standing way, way down at ground level, wondering why they don't feel like millionaires. They don't feel like millionaires because they're not. The math just makes it look that way from a distance. Hold on to that gap. We're going to spend the next 40 minutes climbing across it, and somewhere in the middle, I'm going to answer a question I want you to start chewing on right now. At what exact dollar amount does a person stop being able to tell who actually likes them? Keep that in the back of your mind. We'll get there. Let's start at the bottom, the real bottom. About 1 in 10 American households has a net worth of 0 or less. Not much, 0 or negative, meaning if you sold everything they own and used it to pay off what they owe, they'd still be in the hole. And here's the first ugly truth of this whole climb. When you have nothing, the world doesn't treat you with pity. It treats you with suspicion. Watch what actually happens. You walk into a store in clothes that have seen a few too many wash cycles and somebody follows you down the aisle. Not to help you find the cereal. You go to rent an apartment and they want first month, last month, and a security deposit all at once. A wall of cash right at the exact moment you have the least of it. You bounce one payment and the bank charges you $35 for the crime of being $3 short. So the $3 coffee becomes a $38 coffee, and the only people who ever pay that fee are the people who could least afford the $35. This has a name, it's called the poverty premium, and it's the most backwards thing in personal finance. It literally costs more to be poor. Let me show you the math because it's genuinely insane. If you've got good credit and a cushion and you need to borrow $500 for a week, you barely pay anything. You put it on a card, you pay it off, the cost is a rounding error. But if you're broke, you don't have the card and you don't have the cushion. So you walk into a payday lender And that payday loan, according to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, runs an annual percentage rate of almost 400%. 400. The same act, borrowing $500, is priced completely inversely to how much you need it. The less you have, the more they charge you for the privilege of getting it. It doesn't stop at loans. Your car insurance is partly priced in your credit score, which means two people with identical driving records, never had an accident, never got a ticket, pay wildly different premiums, and the poorer one pays more. Not because they're a worse driver, because they're poor. You can't buy in bulk, so you pay more per roll of toilet paper. You can't afford the good boots, so you buy the cheap ones that fall apart, and you buy them again and again, and over 5 years the cheap boots cost you more than the expensive ones ever would have. There's an old line for this from the writer Terry Pratchett. A rich man buys one $50 pair of boots that lasts 10 years. A poor man buys a $10 pair every single year and his feet are still wet. The poor man pays more, gets less, and stays poor partly because of it. Let me give that a face because we're going to come back to her. Call her Denise. Denise buys the $10 boots every November because the $50 pair isn't a thing she can do in one paycheck. Over 5 winters, she spends $50 and her socks are still soaked every January. The rich guy across town spent the same $50 once a decade ago and forgot he ever bought them. Same $50, one person's been dry for 10 years and the other's been cold the whole time. Keep Denise in your head. She's standing at the bottom of this ladder, and the view from down there is the part nobody making these videos ever actually shows you. Being broke isn't just having less money, it's being charged a tax for the sin of not having money, and nobody hands you a receipt for that tax. It just quietly bleeds out of you every month, and the receipt that does exist, your credit report, follows you into rooms that have nothing to do with borrowing money. Some employers pull your credit before they hire you. So picture this for a second. You're broke, which means your credit's wrecked, which means the job that could unbreak you is now harder to get, specifically because you're broke. The condition becomes the reason you can't escape the condition. That's not a bug in the system. That's just how the bottom of the ladder is built. It has walls that lean inward. But here's the part that goes deeper than dollars, and honestly, it's the part that messed me up a little when I first read it. There's a study out of Princeton by a researcher named Susan Fisk that looked at how our brains actually process other people, and what she found is that we sort everyone into a quick mental grid based on 2 things. Are you warm and are you competent? The rich get filed under cold but capable. We envy them, we don't trust them, but we respect them. But the very poor, the homeless, the addicted, the people at the absolute bottom, they get filed somewhere worse. A colleague of hers ran brain scans while people looked at photos of folks living on the street. And the part of the brain that normally lights up when you look at another human being, the part that says, that's a person, that's someone with an inner life. For a lot of subjects, it didn't fully switch on. Their brains were processing the poorest people less like people and more like objects, like furniture, like a thing on the sidewalk you step around. That's not a metaphor. That's a brain scan. That is how brutal the bottom of this ladder is. You're not just poor. To a chunk of the people walking past you, you've stopped fully registering as human. So that's rung 1. Let's climb. Now you've scraped together a little, maybe $10,000 to your name. You're above zero. You've got a small buffer. One bad month won't end you anymore. It'll just scare you. And here's what changes about how the world treats you at this level. Almost nothing. But in a specific, interesting way, like at 10 grand, you stop getting the suspicion. Nobody's following you down the cereal aisle anymore. But you also don't get anything. You are, to every institution you interact with, a transaction, not a relationship, a transaction. Think about what that actually means. When you call your bank with a problem, you get the phone tree. Press 1, press 2, hold music. A representative reading from a script who has zero power to actually fix anything for you. Your flight gets canceled, you're in group 9, and let's be honest, group 9 isn't a boarding group, it's a polite way of telling you the overhead bins are already someone else's problem. You board last, you get the middle seat by the bathroom, and when you ask for help, you get a shrug and a meal voucher for an airport. that has exactly one open pretzel stand. You're not being mistreated exactly. You're just being processed. You're a number in a queue, and the queue does not care about you. And here's the trap of these lower middle rungs. This level feels normal. It feels like just being a regular person in the regular world. You don't notice that you're getting the bare minimum because the bare minimum is all you've ever been shown. You think this is just how banks are, how airlines are, how the world is. It's not. It's just how the world is for people with $10,000. There's a whole other world of treatment running parallel to yours, and you can't see it yet because the door to it is invisible from where you're standing. But there's one more thing about the bottom middle that's worth naming, because it's quietly corrosive. At this level, you're assumed to be a liability until proven otherwise. You return something to a store, and they treat it like you might be running a scam. You dispute a charge, and the burden's on you to prove you're honest. The default assumption pointed at you is suspicion, and you have to spend energy disproving it. Climb high enough, and that assumption flips completely. The wealthy get assumed honest, get the benefit of the doubt by default, get the charge reversed with an apology instead of an interrogation. Same dispute. Opposite starting assumption, you spend the bottom of the ladder proving you're not a problem. You spend the top of it being assumed you never were. Let me show you where that door is. Push up to 50, 80, 100,000 in net worth. Now you're getting close to that median we talked about, the actual middle of the country. You've got some retirement savings, maybe a little equity in something, a real emergency fund, and the way you get treated here is, and I mean this as the compliment the system intends, completely unremarkable. You are the default human. The factory setting, every ad, every store layout, every easy monthly payment of every mortgage product is calibrated for you. You're the bullseye of the entire consumer economy, which sounds nice, and in a lot of ways it is. But understand what the default actually means. It means you're the one they've designed all the friendly little traps for. The store credit card at the register with the instant 10% off, the 0% for 6 months financing on the couch, the lease that lets you drive a nicer car than you could ever buy. None of that exists for the broke guy. He doesn't qualify. And none of it really exists for the rich woman. She doesn't need it. It exists for you. The comfortable middle, because you've got just enough to be worth extracting from, and not quite enough to know better. You're not being hunted at this level. You're being farmed gently, pleasantly, with outstanding customer service and a really nice email newsletter. Nobody farms a field they hate. They keep it watered, they keep it happy, they tell it what a valued field it is right up until harvest, and it is so smooth that most people spend their entire lives here and never once notice the fence around the field. Quick gut check before we keep climbing, because this next jump is where it starts getting weird. So far, we've gone from suspicion to invisibility to being the comfortable default. 3 completely different treatments, and you haven't even cracked $250,000 yet. Now watch what happens the second you do, because right around here, for the first time in your life, an institution is going to start chasing you. $250,000 to $500,000 in net worth with a decent chunk of it in actual investable assets, and something genuinely new happens, something you've literally never experienced before. A bank wants you. This is the rung where it happened to Nathan, by the way. About 6 weeks after the money landed, he got a letter inviting him to become a private client, and a woman the bank had assigned to him called to introduce herself. He told me it was the single strangest phone call of his life, not because of what she said, but because in 11 years of banking there, not one human being had ever called him for any reason that wasn't a problem. Now somebody wanted to buy him lunch. Not your business in the abstract. You. They send a letter or you get a call, and suddenly you're being invited to become a preferred client, a private client. There's a tier now with a nice name, and you're being asked up into it. Chase has one of these that kicks in somewhere around $200,000 in deposits and investments. And the moment you cross that line, you get assigned a human being, an actual named person whose literal job is to be nice to you. Feel how strange that is. Your entire life up to this point, you've been the one calling them. waiting on hold for them, pressing 1 for them, and now at $250,000, the relationship flips. They call you by name, they remember your kids, they just wanted to check in. They send a bottle of something around the holidays. You will receive, I promise you, at least one fruit basket. There is no clearer signal in American finance that you have crossed a meaningful threshold than the unsolicited arrival of artisanal pears. Here's what's actually happening under the hood. Somewhere on a spreadsheet at that bank, you crossed a threshold where you stopped being a cost and started being an asset. Below the line, every minute they spend on you loses the money, so they shove you into the phone tree to make you cheaper to serve. Above the line, every minute they keep you happy makes them money, so they assign you a person to make you feel special. Same bank, same you. The only thing that moved was which side of one invisible line your balance landed on. I'm going to give that line a name because it runs underneath this entire video, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. Call it the profit line. Below the profit line, you cost the institution money, so they make you cheaper to deal with. The phone tree, the script, the shrug. Above the profit line, you make the institution money, so they make you feel wonderful, the name, the call, the fruit basket. Every single tier from here up is really just a story about how far above the profit line you've climbed and what people are willing to do to keep you there. And you can watch this flip in real time with something as simple as a loan. Take 2 people who walk into the same bank on the same day, both asking to borrow money. The first one's broke, so the bank sees risk and prices it like risk, high rate, mountains of paperwork, maybe a no. The second one's got $500,000 in assets parked at that bank, so the bank sees a relationship it wants to protect, and suddenly the rate's better, the paperwork's smoother, and there's a friendly person walking it through for them. Same product, same act of borrowing. The person who needs it least gets the best deal, and the person who needs it most gets the worst one. The whole system runs upside down, and it runs upside down on purpose because the bank isn't pricing your need, it's pricing your balance. And here's the seductive part. It works. After a lifetime of being processed, somebody finally remembers your name and offers you a coffee. You'd have to be made of stone not to feel warm about it. But never lose sight of what it is. That warmth has a price tag, and the price tag is your assets sitting at their institution. The friendliness is real, and it is also precisely the value of your account. The second the account leaves, so does the friend. Still, this is the rung where the world stops resisting you and starts pulling you forward, and it only gets stronger from here. $1 million, the millionaire. The word every kid grows up thinking means you've made it. Yachts, helicopters, never working again. Let me ruin it for you gently with one piece of math. $1 million in a retirement account using the standard rule that you can safely pull about 4% of it a year without running out. That's $40,000 a year, 40 grand. That is what $1 million actually buys you as a lifelong income. It's a perfectly fine middle-class salary that happens to arrive without a job attached. It is not a yacht. It is not a helicopter. It's solid. It's secure-ish. But millionaire as a word is writing a check that millionaire as a number absolutely cannot cash. About 22% of American households have crossed the $1 million line, more than 1 in 5. The word still sounds like royalty, but the number has quietly become upper middle class. Inflation ate the glamour and left the title. But here is where the human treatment takes its first genuinely dark turn. Because at $1 million, if people find out, and people find out, the phone calls start. Not from the bank this time, from your own family. For Nathan, it was a cousin he hadn't spoken to in 3 years who suddenly remembered his number. The call opened with, "We should really catch up more," and closed about 9 minutes in with a business idea. Nathan said the worst part wasn't the ask. It was that he spent the whole 9 minutes waiting for it, so he never actually heard a word about how the guy was doing. It starts soft. A brother who's going through a rough patch and could really use a few thousand just till he's back on his feet. A cousin with a can't-miss business idea who just needs a little seed money from someone who believes in him. A parent who never ever asked you for anything suddenly mentioning very casually how expensive the medication's gotten, and none of these people are villains. I want to be careful here because this is exactly where it would be easy to get cynical and start hating everyone. Don't. Most of them genuinely need help or genuinely love you or both. But something real and uncomfortable has shifted. You used to be their brother, their cousin, their kid. Now you're also quietly a resource, a potential yes. And you can feel the math running behind their eyes during conversations that used to be simple. You start wondering whether the dinner invite is a dinner invite or an ask. You start hearing a second meaning under every "how have you been?" That's the tax nobody warns you about at $1 million. It's not a fee. It's not the poverty premium flipped around. It's subtler and it's worse. It's the slow contamination of your ability to take the people you love at face value. The money didn't make them worse. It just made you unable to be sure. And the really insidious part is how it changes you, not them. Because once you've had one conversation that turned out to be an ask in disguise, you start pre-screening all of them. Your sister calls just to talk, no agenda, nothing. And you spend the first 5 minutes waiting for the pivot that never comes. You've started auditing the people who love you for motives they don't even have. The money built a little interrogation room in the back of your head, and now everyone you care about gets walked through it whether they deserve it or not. Nobody asked you to install that room. It just came free with the balance. And I promise you that question, can I still trust this, only gets louder the higher we go. Now hold on, because there's a question we've been skipping past, and it's a big one. This whole video runs on the idea that people treat you differently once they know how much you've got. But how do they know? Nobody walks around with their net worth tattooed on their forehead. The barista never saw Nathan's bank statement. So how does the world figure out which rung you're standing on? And the answer is genuinely weird because the signals flip as you go up. Down low, people broadcast when someone first comes into a little money. The instinct is almost always to make it visible. The logo on the bag turns so you can read it. The car badge, the watch with a name everyone's supposed to recognize. There's a name for this. An economist named Thorstein Veblen called it conspicuous consumption over 100 years ago, and the whole point of it is being seen to spend. The product isn't really the product. The product is the message. I have arrived. Please update how you treat me accordingly. And here's the thing. It kind of works in the short term on strangers, flash the right signals, and a certain crowd will treat you like you're richer than you are, which is exactly why an entire industry exists to rent those signals to people who don't have them. The Lamborghini you rent by the hour for the photo, the watch you finance. People will go into actual debt to manufacture the appearance of a rung they haven't reached, because the better treatment is that seductive. But here's the twist, and it's the tell that separates people who have money from people performing it. The genuinely, quietly wealthy, especially old money that's been around long enough to get bored of itself, tend to signal less, not more. The richest person in the room is very often the one in the plain sweater and the unbranded everything. No logos, nothing you could point to. Because once you're truly secure, you stop needing strangers to know. The performance is for people who are still climbing. The silence is for people who've arrived and have nothing left to prove to a stranger. There's a writer, Elizabeth Currid Halkett, who put a sharp point on this. She argues the real elite stop signaling with objects at all. They signal with things you can't see in a photograph, where the kids go to school, the doctor they have access to, the time they have, the things they know. Invisible spending. Status that's completely legible to other insiders and completely invisible to everyone else. So the loud guy in the logos, often climbing. The quiet woman you'd never look at twice. So sometimes she's the one with the family office. And the signals don't just get quieter as you go up. They go underground. Keep that in your back pocket because it explains a lot about the next few rungs. And the higher we climb now, the less the wealth announces itself. And the more the treatment happens behind closed doors you didn't even know were there. Now, here's where it gets genuinely strange, and I want to warn you before we step into it, because everything up to this point has had a logic you could feel in your own life. What's coming next does not. From here up, the rules of normal human interaction start quietly suspending themselves around you, one at a time, and the wild part is how fast you stop noticing. By the end of this next stretch, I'm going to show you the exact moment a person forgets the game was ever rigged in their favor, and the psychology study that proves almost all of us would forget it too. $5 million. Now you're genuinely rich. Not millionaire rich, which we just established is a polite fiction. Actually rich. You're in roughly the top 5 or 6% of the entire country. Work is optional. 5 million at that same 4% rule throws off 200,000 a year without you lifting a finger. And that's before the money keeps growing underneath you. And at 5 million, the single most important thing that changes is this. You stop hearing the word no. Think about how much of normal life is built out of small no's. That table's reserved. That's against policy. That flight's full. The doctor can't see you for 3 weeks. Regular life is 1,000 tiny walls you bump into every day. Nathan never got to 5 million. He sold for less than that, and he'd be the first to tell you so. But he watched a guy who did, an old business contact, and the thing he couldn't get over was that this guy genuinely seemed to believe the world had simply gotten more agreeable as he got richer. Not that he was being treated differently, that reality itself had become smoother. At 5 million, the walls start quietly moving out of your way before you even reach them. The restaurant finds a table. The sold out event has a couple of seats nobody mentioned. The policy that's ironclad for everyone else turns out to have an exception with your name on it. You want to see a doctor today? Not in 3 weeks. There's a thing called concierge medicine where for a yearly membership fee, you get a physician's personal cell phone number and same-day appointments. The basic version runs a couple thousand a year. The elite version, with a doctor who has maybe 50 patients total instead of 2,000, can run $50, $60, $80,000 a year. And what you are buying, very literally, is the right to be seen. To skip the waiting room that the rest of the country lives in. Here's the strange psychological thing that happens at this level, and there's real research on it. A Berkeley psychologist named Paul Piff ran a now famous experiment. He sat people down to play Monopoly, but he rigged it. One player got twice the starting money and got to roll 2 dice instead of 1. The game was designed from the first second so that player would win. It wasn't skill, it wasn't strategy, it was the rules handed to them. And here's what Piff watched happen. The rigged player got louder, more aggressive. They started slapping their piece around the board. They literally ate more of the pretzels sitting out on the table. And then, this is the part that gets me, when the game ended and they inevitably won and the researchers asked them why they won, they talked about their strategy, their smart decisions, their skill. They had completely absorbed the idea that they'd earned a game that was rigged in their favor from the start. That's what unbroken deference does to a person over time. When every wall moves out of your way, when every no turns into a yes, it becomes almost impossible to remember that the game is tilted. You start to believe you're just really, really good at walking through doors. You forget someone's holding them open. And I want to give you one concrete picture of what this actually feels like, because you stop hearing no sounds abstract until you've seen it. 2 people try to get a last-minute table at the same booked solid restaurant on the same Friday night. The first one calls, gets told they're full stop, try next month. The second one, who eats there often, tips like the building's on fire, and whose name the manager knows, mentions they're coming in, and somehow a table materializes that the first person was just told did not exist. The table was always there. It was just being held in reserve for the kind of customer the restaurant wanted to keep. That's the whole game at this level, played out 100 times a week across every service you touch. The no was never really a no. It was a no for people who didn't matter enough yet. I'm not telling you that to make you dislike rich people. Most of them are not cackling villains. They're just people standing in a current so steady they've forgotten it's a current at all. And that current is about to get strong enough to wash some important things away. Before we hit the top of the climb, I have to show you a dimension of this that has nothing to do with whether people smile at you, because it's the part with the sharpest teeth. Up to now, we've mostly talked about social treatment, deference, friendliness, name on the cup stuff, but money doesn't just change how warmly you're treated, it changes the actual rules that get applied to you. Or more precisely, it changes whether the rules can reach you at all. Here's the cleanest way to see it. Go back to Denise for a second, the woman with the wet socks from the bottom of the ladder. Say her landlord keeps her $800 deposit when she moves out for damages that are really just a fresh coat of paint. Denise is right, the law is on her side, and she will almost certainly never see that money again, because fighting it means time off work she can't take, a small claims process nobody ever explained to her, and going up against a landlord who does this every month and has a guy for it. So she does the math, and the math says swallow it. She eats $800 she is legally owed, because being owed it and being able to collect it are two completely different things when you're broke. That's the pattern, and it's everywhere. The person at the bottom of the ladder technically has the same rights as everyone else. They just can't afford to use them. The system technically offers them justice, the same way a store technically offers a velvet rope to everyone. It's just that the cost of stepping past it is set right at the level they can't pay. Now run the identical dispute for someone at 5 or 10 million. They make one phone call, a lawyer who's on retainer who knows them picks up. The fight that was impossible for the broke person is, for the rich one, a Tuesday errand they delegate and forget about. Same conflict, same facts. One person is steamrolled by it and the other barely notices it happened. The rules on paper are identical for both of them. The ability to actually use those rules is not. And that gap between having a right and being able to afford to exercise it is one of the widest, quietest gaps on this entire ladder. It almost never shows up in the net worth charts, but you feel it the first time you're on the wrong side of it. So the treatment isn't just, are people nicer to me by the time you're up here? It's, do the consequences that bind everyone else actually bind me? And for a lot of things, the honest answer becomes less and less. The system was always there. Money just buys you the means to make it work for you instead of grinding you down. $10 million, you're now in roughly the top 2% of the country. And at 10 million, a new kind of institution opens its doors to you, and a new kind of problem moves into your house. The institution first. At 10 million in investable assets, you're no longer just a private client with a friendly banker. You qualify for actual private wealth management at the big firms, the JP Morgan Private Bank, Goldman's Private Wealth Division. Their doors tend to open right around this 10 million mark. You're not being sold products off a shelf anymore. You've got a team, people who manage your money, sure, but also people who will help with your taxes, your estate, the structure of your entire financial life. You have functionally been upgraded from customer to client to something closer to a principle that other people work for. Now, the problem that moves in, remember that question I told you to keep in the back of your mind way back at the beginning? At what dollar amount does a person stop being able to tell who actually likes them? For a lot of people, this is the rung where it lands, around here. Because at $10 million, you can't really hide it anymore. The house gives it away. The car, the vacations, the school the kids go to. And once it's visible, every new person who enters your life enters with an asterisk. And before you write this off as a rich person's imaginary problem, sit with it for a second, because you already know this feeling in miniature. You've had the moment where someone's suddenly very friendly right before they ask you for a favor. You've wondered if a compliment was a compliment or a setup. Now take that small familiar flicker of doubt and make it the background hum of every new relationship you'll ever have. The new friend who's so easy to talk to, is that real? Or are they working an angle? The romantic partner who showed up right after the money did, do they love you or do they love the life? You genuinely cannot know. And the cruelest part is that the nicest, most generous version of you, like the one who picks up every check, who flies friends out, who's wildly generous because you can be, That version makes it even harder to tell because now everyone has a reason to keep you happy. This is why, at this level, relationships start getting lawyers attached to them, the prenup before the marriage, the trust with conditions baked in, the careful structuring of what the kids get and when, because you're genuinely worried that handing them everything will hollow them out. Distrust stops being an emotion and becomes paperwork. It becomes a permanent feature of how you do love. There's a study out of Boston College where researchers surveyed seriously wealthy households, many right in this range and above, and asked them essentially, "Are you okay?" And what came back was not a portrait of carefree people on yachts. It was anxiety, isolation, a constant low-grade worry about whether their own children would be ruined by the money, and a deep uncertainty about who their real friends even were. People with more money than they could spend in a lifetime, lying awake wondering if anyone in their life would still be there if the money vanished tomorrow. That's the question mark. And it doesn't get answered by more money. If anything, more money just makes it bigger. So let's sit in that for a second, because I think it's the most important thing in this entire video. And it's the thing almost nobody tells you when you're young and grinding and certain that more money will fix everything. For most of this climb, money has been buying you better treatment. At the bottom, it bought you out of contempt. In the middle, it bought you out of invisibility. Higher up, it bought you out of every no, out of every waiting room, out of every wall. And all of that is real. I'm not going to stand here and pretend money doesn't matter because the poverty premium is real and the 400% payday loan is real and being treated like furniture is real. And money absolutely, genuinely buys you out of all of it. Anyone who tells you money doesn't matter has never been on the wrong side of that brain scan, but somewhere up the ladder, the thing money buys quietly changes. It stops buying better treatment and starts buying a very specific kind of doubt. The richer you get, the better the world treats you, and the less you're able to believe that any of it is about you. Everyone's nicer and you trust it less. That's the trade. And no number on the spreadsheet tells you it's coming. Now, if you've watched this far, you're clearly not someone who just wants to be told money is magic and everything's fine. You want to understand how this stuff actually works under the hood. And here's something worth knowing. The exact video you're watching right now, the kind of finance breakdown that takes a topic everyone thinks they understand and actually digs into the math and the psychology behind it, is a thing a regular person can learn to make. People are quietly building channels exactly like this one and turning them into real income, and most of them aren't finance experts and don't show their faces. That's the single question I get more than any other. How do you actually make these? So we built a place to answer it properly, a community where we walk you through the whole thing, how to research a topic like this one, how to write a script that keeps people watching for 50 minutes, how to get a video like this in front of an audience. If that's something you've been quietly curious about, the link's in the description. No pressure, it's just there if you want it. Now let's finish the climb, because the top rung is the strangest one of all. $25 million. Now, you're in roughly the top 1/4% of the entire country. 1 in 400. And at this level, something happens that's different in kind, not just degree, from everything below it. You don't just get treated differently anymore. You get separated. Around 25 million is where a thing called a family office starts to make sense. A small company that exists for the single purpose of managing your wealth and your life. Below this, you hire professionals one at a time. At this level, you build or buy into an entire organization whose only client is you. They handle the investments, the taxes, the properties, the travel, the staff, sometimes the kids' tuition, and the charitable giving and the thing that broke on the third house. An institution that exists, top to bottom, to serve one family. And think about what that does to your actual daily experience of other human beings. The friction of normal life. The friction that, remember, is where most human contact actually happens, because is now almost entirely gone. You don't wait in the line, so you don't have the small, dumb conversation with the person in the line. You don't call the bank, so you never deal with the bank. You don't book the flight, fight the traffic, stand at the counter, hold the door, or get the door held. Someone handles it. Someone always handles it. The 1,000 tiny frictions that the broke guy at the bottom got punished for, at the top, they're not punishments anymore. They're just gone, smoothed away by people you pay. And here's the trap inside the luxury, the thing that took me a long time to really understand. Every one of those frictions you've eliminated was also a point of contact with the rest of humanity. The barista who learned Nathan's name only learned it because Nathan stood at a counter like everyone else. Take away the counter, and you take away the barista. Build a smooth enough life, and you can go a very long time without a single unscripted interaction with someone who isn't, in some way, on your payroll. And it bleeds into the relationships you do have in a way that's almost too subtle to catch. Think about the people physically closest to you at this level, the ones you actually see every day. A lot of them work for you. The person who manages the house, the one who drives, the assistant who knows your schedule better than you do. And these can be genuinely warm relationships, real affection in both directions. I'm not being cynical about that. But there's a permanent asymmetry underneath them that never fully goes away because at the end of the day, you sign their checks. You can never be 100% certain whether the warmth is friendship or professionalism done extremely well, because the two look identical from the outside, and the person being paid has every reason in the world to keep it that way. So even your daily human contact comes with a small, unanswerable question stapled to it. It's the same question mark from $10 million, except now it's moved into your own house and it pours your coffee. And you know a tiny version of this too. Think about the last time you went a whole day dealing only with screens and apps and nobody actually looked at you. Like the self-checkout, the delivery left at the door, the automated everything. That faint, hollow feeling of a frictionless day with no humans in it. Now build an entire life out of that feeling, except gold-plated, and you've got the top of the ladder. That's the strange, quiet loneliness up there. It's not dramatic. Nobody's crying into their champagne. It's just that the world has arranged itself so completely around your comfort that you can lose track of where the genuine human contact even comes from anymore. At the bottom, the world treated you like you weren't fully a person. At the top, the world treats you so carefully that you can start to feel like you're behind glass. Different mechanism, weirdly similar result. So here's the question that's been sitting under this entire video, and there's actually a fascinating little scientific soap opera attached to it. Does climbing this ladder, does all this better treatment actually make people happier? For about a decade, the famous answer was only up to a point. Two researchers, Daniel Kahneman and Angus Deaton, published a study back in 2010 that found people's day-to-day emotional happiness rose with income, but only until somewhere around $75,000 a year, which is about $118,000 in today's money. After that, they found the happiness flatlined. More money kept making people rate their lives as better on paper, but it stopped making their actual days feel any better. That $75,000 number became gospel. You've probably heard it quoted at a party by someone who was very confident about it. Then, in 2021, a researcher named Matthew Killingsworth came along with better tools, like an app that pinged people in real time to ask how they felt right now, and found something different. Happiness kept rising with income. Well past 75 grand, no flat line. The gospel was wrong. So now you've got two famous studies saying opposite things, which in science is basically a bar fight. And here's the part I love. Instead of feuding, the researchers got in a room together. Kahneman, the guy whose study said it flatlines, and Killingsworth, the guy whose study said it doesn't. And they worked it out. They published the reconciliation in 2023, and the answer turned out to be more interesting than either original. For most people, money does keep buying happiness basically all the way up. The more you have, the better you tend to feel. But there's a specific unhappy minority. People carrying real pain that isn't about money, grief, loneliness, heartbreak, the stuff money genuinely cannot touch. And for them, the happiness does flatten out. More money stops helping because money was never the thing that was hurting them. Picture two people who both just crossed $5 million in the same month. One of them was mostly fine to begin with. good relationships, decent footing. And for that person, the money genuinely does lift things, smooths the edges, opens the days up. The other one is quietly grieving someone, or deeply alone, or carrying something that has no price tag at all. Again, for that second person, the 5 million lands almost silently. They notice the better restaurants and the faster doctors, sure, but the thing actually weighing on them doesn't move an inch because you cannot wire money to the part of a person that's hurting. Same 5 million. Two completely different effects. The money didn't fail. It just was never the right tool for that particular wound, which is, when you actually sit with it, the perfect summary of this entire climb. Money is astonishingly good at fixing the problems that are made of money. The poverty premium, the suspicion, the waiting rooms, the no's. It buys you out of every single one of those. And don't let anyone romanticize being broke by telling you otherwise. But the problems that aren't made of money, whether the people around you are real, whether you're truly known by anyone, whether anyone would still be there if the number went to zero, money doesn't fix those. Past a certain point, it makes them harder to see and harder to solve because it hides them under a very comfortable, very smooth, very lonely pile of other people being nice to you. Which brings us all the way back to Nathan and his coffee. Remember him? Same windbreaker, same frayed cuff, same black coffee, invisible for 9 years, then suddenly known by name the month the money showed up. Here's the thing I didn't tell you at the start. A couple years after the sale, Nathan told me the strangest part wasn't that people started being nice to him. It was that he could no longer fully enjoy it. Because every time the barista smiled and wrote his name on the cup, some small voice in the back of his head asked whether that smile would still be there if the account went back to zero. The thing he'd wanted his whole life to be seen, he finally got it, and the money had quietly poisoned his ability to trust that it was real. He wasn't unhappy exactly, he was just standing on the far side of a piece of glass he hadn't known was there. And think about Denise for a second, all the way back at the bottom, buying her $10 boots in the cold. The distance between Denise and the man behind the glass is the entire ladder we just climbed. But here's the thing that should bother you, the symmetry nobody points out. Denise can't fully trust the world because it keeps taking from her. The deposit, the fees, the 400% loan. Nathan can't fully trust the world because it suddenly wants to give to him. Opposite ends of the profit line, opposite problems, and somehow the same wound. Neither one of them can take the people around them at face value. Money was supposed to be the thing that separated their fates, and in almost every way that shows up on a spreadsheet, it did, but in the one way that doesn't show up anywhere, it left them standing in the exact same place. So let me give you the only takeaway from all of this that I think actually matters. As you climb, and I hope you climb, I want that for you, getting out of the poverty premium and the contempt and the waiting rooms is a genuinely good and worthy thing. Just don't lose track of which kind of treatment you're collecting. There's the kind that's about your account, and there's the kind that's about you. The whole skill of having money, the part nobody teaches, is never confusing one for the other. Keeping a few people in your life who knew you back at the counter before anyone wrote your name on the cup. Because the number changes how the world treats you. We just spent 50 minutes proving that, rung by rung, 0 to 25 million. But it can only change how the world treats you. It was never going to change who's actually there when the lights go out. Like that part, you have to build yourself, and you have to build it on the way up because it's almost impossible to build it once you're already behind the glass. If this changed the way you think about money even a little, do me a favor and tell me in the comments where on this ladder you are right now and which rung surprised you most. I read those. And if you want the deeper version of how I research and build videos exactly like this one, you already know where that lives. It's waiting in the description whenever you're ready. I'll see you on the next one.